fast, where truth moves faster than a Holstein calf. No waiting on some pretty page. We're charting new ground in the digital age. From genomic codes to row-wide facts, we cut through the noise, no holding back. Not your daddy's dairy news tonight. We're sparking debates with every insight. The ring's not where the real fight's at. It's in the data, in the channel chat. From pasture to processor to your morning cup, we're raising the stakes. Try and get ahead of herd. Yeah! Where the future's more than just a word. Ahead of herd. Come on! The bullvine's calling, let your voice be heard.
Welcome to the Bullvine Podcast, where we dig deeper into the stories shaping dairy's future. I'm your host, and today we're tackling something that's been hiding in plain sight across the industry. The genetic gatekeeping that's quietly costing dairy producers millions while concentrating power in the hands of just 4 major companies. We're diving into genetic gatekeepers, the high-stakes gamble of dairy's elite bloodlines. An investigation that reveals how every 1% increase in inbreeding is costing you $23 per cow, and most herds don't even know their levels. If you're a progressive producer who wants to understand what's really driving your breeding decisions and how to protect your herd's future profitability, this episode is essential listening. Let's dive in.
Welcome to the Deep Dive, brought to you by the Bullvine. This is where we sift through the latest articles, research, and insights to bring you the knowledge that truly matters for dairy producers.
And our goal really is always to cut through the noise, to give you those essential nuggets of information presented with clarity and maybe a bit of a fresh perspective.
Yeah, we want to arm you with the insights you need to make informed decisions for your operation.
Absolutely.
Today, we're embarking on a crucial deep dive. We're looking at a feature article from the Bullvine it's sparked a lot of discussion across the industry.
Mm-hmm.
Our mission is to dissect the incredible gains that genomic selection has brought to dairy. That part's undeniable.
Right, huge gains.
But, maybe more importantly, we need to uncover a less talked about, yet equally profound consequence. A rapid and, frankly, accelerating rate of inbreeding.
It's a huge paradox, isn't it?
It really is. And we're here to unpack what we're calling the inbreeding tax.
And it's a conversation that's more relevant now than ever. I mean, when genomics first hit the scene, the excitement was just palpable. You could feel it.
Oh, definitely.
And for good reason. It promised, and honestly, it delivered unparalleled genetic progress. Faster than anyone really thought possible.
Yeah.
But, as we've seen with so many revolutions, there are often these unintended side effects, these consequences that only really become clear with time.
Hindsight is 20/20, right?
Exactly. So we'll be exploring the data, looking at the economic impact, and perhaps most importantly, what you, the producer listening, can actually do about it.
That's right. We're going to dive headfirst into this powerful paradox. How the very thing that supercharged our herds might now be quietly, almost silently, costing them.
Mm-hmm.
So let's start by setting the scene for those incredible gains. Before, say, 2009, the dairy industry operated in a completely different genetic universe.
Completely.
For those perhaps newer to the industry, or maybe just as a reminder for everyone, what did that pre-genomic era, the one defined by progeny testing, truly look like on the ground?
Well, it was a world that demanded immense patience and significant capital investment. A lot of money tied up.
Right.
To identify a truly superior sire back then, you basically embarked on what felt like a multi-year gamble. You'd breed a young, totally unproven bull to a large number of cows.
A leap of faith, really.
Absolutely. And then you'd wait, and wait, and wait some more.
For years!
Yeah, years. You'd wait for his daughters to be born, to grow up, to mature, and critically, to complete at least part of their first lactation.
Only then could you get the actual data.
Only then, after all that time, usually like 5 to 7 years, could you finally collect and analyze their performance data. Measure their milk, their fat, their protein, check calving ease, all of that.
Wow. 5 to 7 years.
It was a slow, very methodical process.
Yes.
And incredibly expensive, as you can imagine.
So that sheer time commitment, it naturally limited how quickly any one bull's genetics could saturate the population, didn't it?
Precisely. It was inefficient, sure, if you're looking purely at speed of progress.
But it had a side effect.
Yeah, it almost served as an inherent, albeit maybe a bit clunky, brake on genetic concentration.
Yeah.
It just sort of kept inbreeding somewhat in check by default.
Because you couldn't flood the market instantly.
Exactly. That multi-year wait to prove a sire naturally restricted how widely and quickly any single bull's genetics could spread. It was a bottleneck, for sure, but maybe think of it as a slow and relatively wide one.
Okay.
Because you simply couldn't get enough semen from one top bull out there fast enough to just dominate everything immediately. The system, just by its very nature, it kind of encouraged a broader spread of genetics, even if it wasn't the most efficient way to get rapid progress on paper.
And then, boom, everything changed. You mentioned 2009 as this definitive inflection point. What were the specific scientific breakthroughs that all came together around that time, and what was their immediate, almost revolutionary impact?
Yeah, 2009 really did redefine dairy genetics, and it wasn't just one single eureka moment, actually. It was more like a rapid convergence of incredible scientific and technological advancements that happened in the early to mid-2000s.
Laying the groundwork.
Exactly. First, back in 2004, we saw the sequencing of the bovine genome. That gave us the foundational genetic map, the blueprint, if you will.
Yeah, the map.
Then came the high-density single nucleotide polymorphism chips. We just call them SNP chips.
Right.
These were the tools that allowed us to read that blueprint quickly and, crucially, cost-effectively. Think of them as incredibly advanced barcode scanners, but for DNA.
Okay, that makes sense.
Illumina, for instance, commercially released their bovine SNP50B chip in December 2007. These chips let geneticists correlate specific DNA markers these SNPs with actual performance traits.
So you could link the gene code to the milk production.
Precisely. By comparing a young animal's genomic profile, its SNP results, to a large reference population that's animals with known pedigrees and actual performance data, the proven ones, we could suddenly predict its genetic merit with remarkable accuracy.
Long before it had any offspring.
Long before it had any offspring or even really matured itself. It was a massive leap.
So if I'm a producer listening, that means I no longer have to wait 5, 6, 7 years for a proven bull. I can get a highly reliable prediction on a young bull, like, almost right away.
Pretty much. It effectively made that whole long, expensive progeny testing process optional.
That's a complete game changer.
It was a seismic shift. And when the USDA released its first official genomic evaluations in January 2009, it really felt like the dam breaking. The impact was immediate, transformative for the whole industry.
How so? What changed first?
The generation interval, that's the average time between generations. It just plummeted dramatically. We're talking about it shrinking from around 7 years for those key sire-to-bull pathways.
7 years.
Down to less than 2.5 years.
Wow. Cut by more than half.
Easily. And selection accuracy on these young animals soared at the same time. Plus, the cost and time to identify the elite individuals, it just fell off a cliff.
So cheaper, faster, more accurate.
You got it. And producers and AI companies, naturally, they rapidly embrace these younger, high-merit sires. Why wouldn't you?
And the numbers really tell that story, don't they? By 2021, the market had completely flipped.
Oh, absolutely. The statistics are, frankly, quite staggering.
Yeah.
By 2021, an incredible 71% of all AI breedings in U.S. dairy herds were to these genomic young sires.
Bulls with no milking daughters of their own.
None. Simply because the genomic prediction was seen as so reliable. That's just a profound testament to the industry's confidence in this new technology and, its ability to deliver results.
That 71% figure really jumps out. It shows how quickly the industry adapted and, trusted this new paradigm.
They jumped in with both feet.
And the promise was indeed to quantify the gain, right? We saw the numbers rocket up, particularly in net merit, NMR, which is the main metric for genetic progress here in the U.S.
Mm-hmm.
What did those gains actually look like in hard data? How much faster were we really moving?
The gains were undeniable, no question, and pretty much exactly as promised, maybe even better in some areas. For Holstein sires, the average annual genetic gain in net merit, NMR, it jumped significantly.
How significantly?
Okay, so in the 5 years before widespread genomic use, roughly 2005 to 2010, that gain was hovering around $40 per year, give or take.
Okay, $40 a year progress.
But in the post-genomic era, looking at, say, 2016 to 2020, that rate more than doubled. It hit an average of $79.20 per year.
Double the speed.
Pretty much double the rate of progress for overall profitability index. And interestingly, for some specific fitness traits, things like fertility and health, which are just incredibly important for your actual bottom line.
Yeah, the things that keep cows in the herd.
Exactly. The improvement there was even more dramatic.
Right.
We saw increases of 200% to 300% in the rate of gain for those traits.
2 to 3 times faster improvement on health and fertility.
Yeah. So in terms of raw genetic progress, especially for those economically vital traits, genomics absolutely delivered. It truly did double our rate of progress, maybe even more in key areas.
Those numbers are incredibly impressive. I mean, it's easy to see why producers and AI companies embraced it so wholeheartedly.
Absolutely.
But this brings us right back to that powerful paradox we introduced at the start. The unintended consequence. The acceleration of inbreeding.
The other side of the coin.
How exactly did the very mechanisms driving this amazing accelerated gain, this incredible speed, also create the perfect conditions for accelerated inbreeding?
It's such a critical connection to grasp because they're intrinsically linked. The same tools that propelled us forward so quickly, those shortened generation intervals we talked about, and the intensified selection pressure on just a handful of top-ranking animals, they inadvertently created the perfect storm for accelerated inbreeding.
How does that work exactly?
Well, when you can identify the best genetics so much faster and then use them so much more widely and quickly through AI, you naturally, almost inevitably, concentrate those bloodlines across the entire population.
Makes sense. Everyone wants the best.
Right. And inbreeding, at its core, is simply the mating of individuals who share common ancestors. This leads to increased homozygosity.
Meaning more identical gene pairs.
Exactly, where an animal inherits identical gene pairs from both its mother and its father because they share ancestry. Now, selecting for desirable traits does increase homozygosity for those specific traits, which is good.
That's the goal?
But inbreeding increases homozygosity indiscriminately across the whole genome. And that raises the risk of expressing deleterious recessive alleles, those hidden genetic flaws that, when an animal gets 2 copies, can severely harm its health, fertility, or performance.
And that's what we call inbreeding depression.
That's inbreeding depression. It's the negative consequence of that increased homozygosity.
So the genomic era didn't change the fundamental rules of genetics. It just, put them on fast forward.
That's a great way to put it.
It sounds like that slow and wide bottleneck of the old progeny testing days was replaced by something much faster and far, far narrower.
Precisely. We found the fast lane, all right, but it turned out to be a much more congested one, genetically speaking.
Okay.
Before genomics, like we said, the sheer time and cost involved naturally limited how quickly and widely any single bull's genetics could spread. But now, with genomic evaluations, the entire global industry can identify and converge around the same handful, literally the top 5 or 10 genomic young sires within a single evaluation run, almost overnight.
Wow. That's intense concentration.
It is, and there's real-world data. The Italian Holstein population provides a really clear, measurable case study. Researchers there observed a significant, quantifiable increase in their annual rate of inbreeding immediately after genomic selection was widely introduced.
So it wasn't theoretical, it actually happened?
It actually happened, and they measured it. The system effectively became architected for convergence, not necessarily for diversity. Its primary objective was laser-focused on maximizing progress as measured by a single standardized definition of economic merit, like net merit here in the U.S.
Right. Maximize NO8.
Exactly. There wasn't an equally weighted built-in incentive for actively maintaining genetic diversity alongside that push for gain. It really became all about climbing that leaderboard.
That structural design, focusing on maximizing just one metric, it makes complete sense from a purely business perspective, maybe, but it clearly has this critical side effect.
Absolutely.
And this brings us to what you've termed the inbreeding tax, quantifying the real economic drag on profitability that dairy producers are facing, maybe without even realizing it. What are we talking about here in terms of actual dollars walking out the barn door?
This is really where it hits home for producers, because it's not some abstract concept. It's a constant, persistent drain on the bottom line. The core metric, which has been consistently revealed through decades of research, actually, it's not new then.
The effect isn't new, no. It's the rate that's accelerated. The research shows approximately $23 to maybe $24 to maybe 24 cents per cow in lost lifetime profit occurs for every single 1% increase in an animal's inbreeding coefficient.
$23 per cow per 1% inbreeding.
Roughly, yeah. And that's lifetime profit lost. It's not a one-off cost. It's consistent, it's cumulative, and it persistently drains profitability throughout a cow's entire productive life.
It's like paying an invisible toll for every single cow, every year.
That's a perfect analogy. An invisible toll.
So for a producer listening right now, this translates into real money that's just gone year after year. Can you give us some compelling, concrete examples? What does this inbreeding tax look like for a typical dairy operation? What kind of financial hit are we talking about?
Absolutely. Let's make it real. Take a 300-cow herd. If that herd gradually increases its average inbreeding from, say, a baseline of 5% up to 12% over a generation, that's a 7% increase, which is happening in many places.
Okay, 7% increase. That herd is looking at a lifetime loss accumulated across all those cows of approximately $48,300.
Wow. Nearly 50 grand vanished.
Yeah. Now scale it up. Imagine a larger operation, maybe a 500-cow herd. If that herd averages 12% inbreeding compared to a similar herd that maybe managed to maintain, say, 5% inbreeding,
Okay.
that operation is bleeding roughly $80,500 annually.
$80,000 a year.
Roughly. It's this silent tax, as you called it, that just compounds quietly year after year across every single animal in the herd. It erodes margins without ever sending you a bill you can easily itemize.
And it's not just hitting one specific area, is it? This inbreeding tax isn't a single straightforward deduction. It kind of deconstructs across several key traits that are absolutely fundamental to a cow's performance and profitability.
Where are these costs hitting hardest?
It's truly multifaceted. It impacts nearly every aspect of a cow's performance, unfortunately. Let's break it down. For production traits, we consistently see a reduction in milk, fat, and protein yield.
Less in the tank. Exactly. Research indicates a 1% increase in inbreeding can lead to a decrease of somewhere between 66.5 to maybe 82 pounds of milk, about 2.5 pounds of fat, and 2.0 pounds of protein per lactation.
Per lactation.
Per lactation. And over a cow's lifetime, that adds up. We're talking a significant loss of around 790 pounds of lifetime milk just from that 1% increase.
Wow. Then there's fertility, right? That's huge.
Absolutely. Fertility and reproduction is a cornerstone of dairy profitability. Everyone knows that. And inbreeding demonstrably decreases reproductive performance. Estimates range from 3% to 5% drop per 1% inbreeding.
That leads to longer calving intervals.
Yep, about 0.26 days longer calving interval per 1% inbreeding. And it means requiring more services per conception.
More straws, more time, more hassle.
Exactly. These are direct hits to your bottom line. More time, more semen, more labor tied up just trying to get cows pregnant.
So we're talking less milk, harder breeding, longer open periods. And I assume it also impacts the long-term health and, critically, the longevity of the herd. It cuts short a cow's productive life, which is where they really start paying you back.
Precisely. You hit the nail on the head. For longevity and health, each 1% increase in inbreeding can shorten a cow's productive life by anywhere from 6 to 13 days. Just gone. And this translates directly to higher involuntary culling rates, cows leaving the herd before you want them to, often for health or reproductive reasons linked back to this.
That means higher replacement costs.
Exactly. Increased replacement costs because you need to raise or buy more heifers just to maintain herd size. And you suffer that loss of revenue from those mature, high-producing cows who should be your most efficient milkers, but they're leaving the herd prematurely. You're basically losing your prime production years from those animals.
What's particularly, I guess, unsettling about this inbreeding tax is how you describe it as often going unrecognized. It kind of masquerades as other, more visible farm-level problems.
Yeah. That's what makes it so insidious. It's truly the silent tax, something that's always there but almost never gets explicitly identified on the farm balance sheet.
How does that happen?
Well, producers rarely, if ever, receive an itemized bill that says, loss due to inbreeding, X dollars. Instead, they see symptoms. Maybe a few more open cows than expected this year, or a slight but consistent increase in culling for reproductive failure, or maybe milk production that consistently falls just a bit short of projections, even though they feel they're doing everything right with nutrition and management.
So you blame the feed or the weather or something else.
Exactly. These issues are logically but often incorrectly attributed to more visible factors: nutrition programs, heat stress protocols, maybe even the labor force's compliance with milking or breeding protocols. So the financial drag from inbreeding is systematically misdiagnosed at the operational level.
Which prevents any targeted intervention.
Well, precisely. It's like having a slow, persistent leak in your pipeline that you just can't quite pinpoint. It's constantly eroding your efficiency, but you're busy fixing other things you can actually see.
And some recent Italian research really underscores just how much we might be underestimating the actual damage. It suggests that silent tax might be even more impactful than we previously thought.
That's a crucial point, and it highlights the limitations of the older ways we used to measure this. A 2023 Italian study demonstrated something really stark. When they used genomic data, the actual DNA, to assess inbreeding, it revealed milk reductions of about 61 kilograms per 1% inbreeding.
Okay, 61 kilos using genomics.
Right. But that was significantly worse than the 44 kilograms that is predicted by just using traditional pedigree data for the same animals.
Wow, that's a big difference.
It's a huge difference. It confirms that traditional pedigree-based methods often underestimate the true genomic inbreeding by 40% or even more in some cases.
So the economic cost is actually higher.
Exactly. It means the true economic costs we're talking about, the actual inbreeding tax you're paying on farm, is likely even greater than previously thought based on older pedigree estimates. We were essentially, like you said before, flying with a faulty altimeter, thinking the problem was less severe than it actually was.
That's a truly sobering thought. It means the problem is not just hidden, but potentially much deeper, much more costly than we realized. Okay, let's try and unpack this further. We've talked about the genetic and economic impacts right there on the farm, but let's shift focus a bit to the broader industry structure.
Okay.
Because despite what often appears to be a wealth of choices for producers, lots of bulls in the catalogs, genetic diversity seems to be shrinking overall. This brings us to what the article calls the architecture of concentration, the market dynamics, and what you refer to as the elite sire funnel.
Yeah, and what's truly fascinating, maybe even a little ironic here, is how individual, perfectly rational decisions made by producers like you, when aggregated across an entire industry, can inadvertently lead to a collective long-term detriment for the breed itself.
How so?
The elite sire funnel is this really powerful mechanism where everyone, quite understandably, wants the best genetics available, right? The highest index bulls.
Of course. You want progress.
Exactly. But that collective desire, especially when it's combined with current market dynamics, can inadvertently create this profound concentration problem. It just pushes us all towards the same narrow genetic bottleneck.
So let's start by laying out that highly concentrated industry landscape. How big is this global animal genetics market? And who are the key players that really dominate it, especially in dairy?
Well, the global animal genetics market is a significant economic engine. It's valued at over $6 billion annually, and it continues to grow pretty steadily. North America is a major player in that, commanding over, say, 32% of that global market share.
And dairy is a big part of that.
Oh, yeah. The bovine segment, dairy and beef, is the largest and most valuable component within that market. But what's truly striking, especially for you listening as a dairy producer, is the intense concentration on the supply side.
Meaning who sells the semen?
Exactly. We're talking about just a handful of key players that control the vast majority of the market. Companies like STgenetics, Genus Plat, which owns ABS Global Cemex, and URUS Group LP. Those are the most prominent names that come up again and again.
And you have some concrete data that really illustrates this dominance, don't you?
Yeah.
Especially when we look at the very top tier of genetics, the elite bulls everyone wants.
Absolutely. It's quite stark when you dig into it. If you examine the genomic net merit sire share, meaning which companies' bulls are topping the lists and being used most often as of, say, April 2025 data, STgenetics commands a staggering 53.5% of that market share. Just one company.
Over half the elite market.
Over half. And then if you add in select sires and Cemex to that, you're looking at roughly 85% of the elite genetics market in North America being controlled by just those three companies.
Wow. 85% from three players.
Yeah. So this isn't just about general market share. It's a very strong signal that the elite sire stream, the one everyone is chasing for maximum genetic gain, effectively runs through just a few very specific gates.
So it's not just the market structure itself. It's how incentives align within that structure that leads these individual, perfectly rational choices to drive this collective risk. How does value-based pricing, for instance, play directly into this funnel effect?
It's an incredibly powerful, almost magnetic mechanism. Value-based pricing directly ties the cost of the semen straw to a bull's index ranking, whether that's net merit, NM1, or TPI, or whatever index is popular.
The higher the rank, the higher the price.
Generally, yes. And this creates an undeniable economic pressure. Producers acting rationally to maximize their own herd's profitability are naturally drawn to those top-ranking bulls on the leaderboard. I mean, why wouldn't you want the best performing genetics for your herd, right?
It makes perfect sense on paper.
But this collective gravitation towards the same few top sires inevitably leads to repeated use of the same genetic lines. And as an unavoidable side effect, that tightens pedigree overlap across the entire industry. It's not, a malicious act by anyone. It's just rational actors making what they perceive as the smartest, most immediate economic decision for their own farm.
And beyond just the pricing, there are also these exclusive contracts and nucleus herds that further concentrate the most sought-after genetics, effectively keeping them within a very tight circle, right?
That's another crucial layer to this concentration puzzle. Things like early access agreements, VIP semen contracts, first option rights on progeny. These are pretty common business practices among the major AI companies.
So they lock up the best stuff early.
Essentially, yes.
Yeah.
These arrangements effectively keep the very best, newest genetics within their internal pipelines, primarily for those companies' own nucleus herds. These are the elite herds that they use to breed the next generation of bulls. And this creates what we might call a two-speed market. You've got the nucleus herds racing ahead on these cutting-edge lines, using the newest, most elite genetics for their own internal genetic progress and, importantly, to develop the next generation of top sires they'll sell.
And everyone else.
Meanwhile, the broader commercial base, the everyday producer, often gets later waves of these genetics, sometimes after those lines have already begun to saturate the population somewhat.
So it reinforces the dominance of the big players.
It certainly helps reinforce their market position, yeah. And critically, it accelerates the rate of inbreeding across the entire system because those foundational lines become even more widespread.
So in essence, it sounds like a classic tragedy of the commons playing out, but this time it's for the bovine genome itself.
That's a really apt description.
Everyone's doing what appears to be best for their own short-term gain, but it leads to a collective long-term risk for the entire breed.
Precisely. For an individual producer, choosing the highest index sire seems like the most logical, profitable decision in that moment. For an AI company, aggressively marketing their next chart-topping role makes perfect business sense and maximizes shareholder value.
Right.
But when every actor in the system makes their own most rational short-term decision, the collective long-term outcome is this rapid narrowing of the gene pool and a dangerous increase in systemic genetic risk. There's just no inherent market-based incentive for any single actor to prioritize collective genetic diversity over their own individual index-driven gain.
It's a structural problem, like you said, not necessarily a villain story.
Exactly. It's baked into the current system's incentives.
This leads directly to what you've called the illusion of choice. You might look at a sire catalog with dozens, maybe even hundreds of bulls listed from multiple companies, giving this impression of wide diversity. But a deeper look often reveals something quite different.
Yeah, that's a really important point. You, as a producer, might receive catalogs from several different companies. They're all well-produced, showing lots of bulls, which naturally gives the impression of a diverse and competitive marketplace. Lots of options.
Right. Looks like plenty of choice.
However, if you do a closer pedigree analysis, really dig into the family trees, you often find that a large percentage of these commercially distinct bulls are actually sons, or maybe grandsons, of the same few globally dominant sires of sons.
So they all trace back to the same few ancestors.
Very often, yes. So while there appears to be commercial diversity, different bull names, different company codes, it can mask a severe lack of underlying genetic diversity. You're often choosing between slight variations within the same core genetic families, rather than truly diverse, unrelated options.
And the impact of this concentration isn't just theoretical, is it? It's actually showing up in very real regional reality checks across different parts of the U.S. What are producers experiencing on the ground because of this?
Yeah, we're definitely seeing clear and concerning patterns emerge in different regions. For example, in the upper Midwest, think places like Wisconsin, Minnesota, you'll find large, well-managed herds, sometimes hundreds of miles apart,
Right.
that still show eerily similar sire stacks when you look closely at their pedigrees, even though they might have different nutritionists, different management styles, maybe even different breeding advisors telling them what to use.
So it's proof that everyone's fishing in the same small pond.
It's direct on-farm proof of how just a handful of popular bull families can dominate selection decisions regionally simply because everyone is buying off the same highly concentrated list of top index sires.
Okay, what about other regions?
Well, shift over to California's Central Valley. Producers there are battling extreme heat, serious water scarcity issues, completely different environment. And they're finding that many of the top index bulls, the ones optimized perhaps for production in more moderate climates or confinement systems, simply weren't bred for their specific climate challenges. They struggled to find good, slick coat gene options or genuinely heat-tolerant bulls or even pasture-efficient outcross options within that elite commercial stream.
Because those traits aren't weighted as heavily in the main index.
Exactly. Those specific adaptation traits often aren't showing up high enough on the leaderboards to get widespread use, leaving those producers with fewer suitable choices from the mainstream suppliers.
So those top-performing bulls on paper aren't always translating to top performance in every single environment. And you're seeing dairies quietly trying different approaches in other regions too because of this disconnect.
Precisely. Down in the Southeast, states like Georgia, Florida, they're dealing with intense heat, high humidity, significant parasite pressure. Very different challenges again. And dairies there are increasingly and often quite quietly experimenting with crossbreeding or seeking out genuine outcross sires from different populations.
Why?
Because the high-input, confinement-optimized mainstream genetics that dominate the leaderboards often just don't fit the reality of their specific environmental challenges. They need resilience, maybe more than that extra pound of milk on paper, and they're finding they have to look outside the most popular genetic lines to find it.
It really sounds like a powerful disconnect between what's available at the very top of the leaderboard and what's truly needed on the ground in some of these diverse, challenging environments.
It certainly seems that way, yeah. The system rewards one type of cow, but not all environments suit that type.
And that brings us to a really critical point about how we even measure this risk. You've pointed out that the traditional ways we measure inbreeding might actually be misleading us, potentially making the problem seem less severe than it truly is. And then tied to that, we have a stark historical example that should probably give everyone pause. A real cautionary tale from our own industry's history.
Yeah, what's fascinating here is the science, how our understanding of measuring inbreeding has evolved so much. For decades, we relied heavily on pedigree-based methods, just looking at family trees.
Right.
But genomic science has now shown us a much clearer and often, frankly, much more alarming picture of the actual genetic landscape within our herds.
And the historical example.
The historical example you're referring to, Pawnee Farm Arlinda Chief. His story is truly the ghost in the machine for the dairy industry. It powerfully highlights the profound lessons we've learned, or maybe should have learned, about the hidden, potentially devastating risks of extreme genetic concentration.
Okay, let's start with measuring what matters. You mentioned the old standard pedigree-based inbreeding, or FPED. What exactly is that, and what were its inherent limitations? Why wasn't it giving us the full picture?
Okay, so FPED, or pedigree inbreeding, is essentially an estimate based entirely on the family tree, the known ancestors. It's defined as the probability that an individual possesses two alleles at any given gene, that's two copies of a gene that are identical simply because they were inherited from a common ancestor somewhere back in the lineage.
So you trace the lines back.
Exactly. You calculate it by meticulously tracing an animal's lineage back through generations, looking for those loops where ancestors appear on both the sire's and dam's side. While it was the best tool we had for a long, long time, its accuracy depends entirely on the depth and, crucially, the completeness of those pedigree records. If you have missing ancestors or even small errors in the database, it can lead to a significant underestimation of the true relatedness between animals.
Garbage in, garbage out, basically.
Somewhat, yeah. And maybe more fundamentally, FPED is just a statistical expectation, a probability. It can't account for the actual random process of Mendelian sampling, how genes actually get shuffled and passed down during reproduction.
So an animal might get more or less DNA from an ancestor than predicted.
Exactly. An individual might actually inherit more or less of their genome from a particular ancestor than the pedigree-based probability suggests. So FPED is an educated guess, a good one based on what we knew, but it can miss a lot of what's truly happening right there at the DNA level.
So it's like trying to figure out how related two people are just by looking at their family tree on paper without actually doing a DNA test. It's helpful, but it's definitely not the full picture.
That analogy is absolutely spot on.
And the new gold standard you've said is based on genomics looking at runs of homozygosity, or FROH. How does that differ? And why is it considered so much more robust and accurate?
Right. FROH, or runs of homozygosity, is like doing that direct genetic scan, that DNA test. It's a far more direct and therefore more accurate measure of actual inbreeding. A run of homozygosity, an ROH, is defined as a long, continuous segment of an animal's genome where the allele is inherited from both the sire and the dam, are identical.
Okay, long identical stretches.
Exactly. These long homozygous stretches occur when an individual inherits the exact same ancestral chromosome segment from both parents because of that shared ancestry further back. FROH is then calculated simply as the total length of all these ROH segments in an animal's genome divided by the total length of the genome itself.
So it's a direct measurement, not a probability.
Precisely. It's not a probability or an estimate based on history. It's a direct empirical measurement of the actual proportion of an animal's DNA that is autozygous, meaning identical by descent. This makes it far more robust and accurate at quantifying the true level of inbreeding because it directly reveals those shared segments of DNA inherited from common ancestors.
And you mentioned there's a significant measurement gap between these two methods, FPED and FROH. This gap has profound economic implications, right? We were, as you so aptly put it earlier, potentially flying with a faulty altimeter, underestimating the real problem.
That's a perfect analogy, and it's truly unsettling when you see the numbers. Studies consistently show that FROH values are significantly higher, often much higher than the FPED values calculated for the same animals.
How much higher?
Well, for example, that 2023 study of Italian Holstein cattle we talked about, it found an average FPED of 7% in their population. But when they measured FROH on the same animals using genomic data, the average was 16%.
16%. That's more than double.
More than double. And this isn't an isolated finding. It means pedigree-based methods often fail to capture a large portion of the actual homozygosity, the true inbreeding that's present in our herds today.
And that gap has huge economic implications.
Huge. The same Italian study modeled inbreeding's impact on milk production using both methods. FPED suggested a 263 kilogram milk loss per lactation for a certain shift in inbreeding percentile. But FROH, the more accurate measure, showed a 561 kilogram loss for the exact same shift in percentile based on genomics.
Wow, more than double the predicted loss, too.
Exactly. It means the true economic cost of inbreeding depression, that tax we keep talking about, is far greater than what was predicted by pedigree data alone. We were indeed underreporting the true level of risk, which inevitably leads to misinformed breeding decisions.
So it's not just that inbreeding itself is increasing, but the type of inbreeding, particularly the kind generated in the genomic era, might be becoming more detrimental. That's a critical distinction, isn't it?
It absolutely is, because not all inbreeding is created equal in terms of its immediate impact.
Yeah.
Long ROH segments, those long stretches of identical DNA, are indicators of recent inbreeding.
Meaning the shared ancestor is close up in the pedigree.
Generally, yes. It means there hasn't been much time, evolutionarily speaking, for recombination, the natural shuffling of genetic material during meiosis to break up those ancestral chromosome segments. Shorter ROH segments, on the other hand, are usually remnants of more ancient inbreeding further back in the lineage.
And the recent stuff is worse.
Research consistently shows that these long, recent ROH segments have a more potent negative effect on production traits, fertility, and overall health compared to the same amount of homozygosity coming from shorter, older segments.
Okay.
And the rapid generation turnover and intense selection pressure that are characteristic of the genomic era, they are perfectly designed to create and then quickly propagate these more harmful, long ROH segments throughout the population. It makes the problem potentially even more acute than just the overall percentage might suggest.
This brings us right back to that cautionary tale you mentioned, Pawnee Farm Arlinda Chief. For listeners who might be unfamiliar, who was Chief and what was his, well, almost unparalleled influence on the Holstein breed?
Chief. Well, born back in 1962, he was truly a legend of the dairy world, arguably one of the single most impactful sires in the history of any livestock breed, really. His daughters were just renowned for their exceptional milk production. They consistently rewrote the record books and fundamentally changed the industry's expectations for what a Holstein cow could produce.
He set a new standard.
He absolutely did. And his genetic influence, thanks primarily to the power of AI, spread like wildfire across the globe. He directly produced over 16,000 registered daughters. He sired something like 500,000 granddaughters. And estimates are over 2 million great-granddaughters.
That's staggering reach.
It is. And his sons also became hugely popular and influential sires in their own right. Today, even now, decades later, it's estimated that a staggering 14-15% of the entire modern North American Holstein genome traces directly back to him.
One bull accounts for 15% of the breed's DNA.
Roughly, yes. His genetic shadow is incredibly long, incredibly wide, and almost inescapable in many Holstein pedigrees. It's a testament to his perceived value back then and the incredible power of AI to propagate specific genes very quickly.
So he was a production superstar revolutionizing milk yields. But baked into that unparalleled influence, as you mentioned, was a hidden ticking time bomb, a genetic defect. What was it, and how did it manifest itself over time?
Yeah, that's the tragic irony of Chief's story, isn't it? While he brought immense progress in production, he was also, unknowingly at the time, a carrier of a lethal recessive genetic defect.
What kind of defect?
This defect was later identified and named Holstein haplotype 1, or HH1. Specifically, it turned out to be what's called a nonsense mutation in the APAF1 gene. Essentially, it's a critical genetic typo that prematurely stops the production of a vital protein.
And what does that protein do?
This APAF1 protein is absolutely critical for normal fetal development, particularly for the central nervous system. Without it, the fetus can't develop properly.
So it's lethal.
It's lethal when homozygous, yes. Now, as a recessive condition, carriers like Chief himself appear perfectly normal. They're healthy, high-performing animals. The problem only arises if two carriers happen to mate.
Right, the classic recessive inheritance pattern.
Exactly. In that scenario, there's a 25% chance that the resulting offspring will inherit two copies of the mutated APAF1 gene, and that homozygous condition is fatal. It typically leads to early embryonic loss or spontaneous abortion, often happening so early that the producer might not even realize the cow was pregnant in the first place.
So for decades, this was just a mystery. Producers would maybe experience higher pregnancy losses in certain cow families, but it was just written off as bad luck or maybe some environmental factor.
Pretty much, yeah. For decades, that higher than average pregnancy loss observed in some of Chief's descendants was an unsolved puzzle. It was often attributed to various non-genetic factors, or just chalked up to the inherent difficulties and vagaries of reproduction. It wasn't linked back directly.
Until genomics came along.
Exactly. The genomic era was absolutely key to finally unraveling this mystery. In the early 2010s, USDA researchers, using genomic data from thousands of animals, identified a specific problematic haplotype, a segment of DNA on chromosome 5 that was clearly linked to reduced fertility in Holsteins.
They found the statistical signal.
They found the signal. And then, crucially, they painstakingly traced that specific haplotype directly back through the pedigrees to Pawnee Farm Arlinda Chief. He was the source.
Wow.
With that critical lead, geneticists at UC Davis, who happen to have Chief's full genome sequenced, were able to pinpoint the exact APAF1 mutation within that haplotype in remarkably about 24 hours.
That's incredible speed. And what was the estimated impact of this single defect once they realized what was happening, both in terms of animal loss and the economic cost?
The economic fallout was just staggering when they calculated it. The estimated impact included over 500,000 spontaneous abortions worldwide, 500,000 lost pregnancies, and approximately $420 million in global economic losses attributed just to this single defect carried by one bull.
$420 million. That's a catastrophe by any measure. To think one bull's hidden genetic flaw caused such widespread, costly devastation.
It really was.
But here's the truly critical lesson, perhaps the most challenging part of this story, what you've termed the cultural trap. Despite those massive quantifiable losses, the $420 million Chief's production upside, the value he brought through milk, still made him a net positive sire overall. This set a really dangerous precedent, didn't it?
This is arguably the most profound and deeply unsettling lesson from the entire Chief saga. Despite causing an estimated $420 million in direct losses due to embryonic death, Chief's immense positive genetic contribution, primarily through the massive milk production gains he passed on to millions of descendants, was valued at an estimated $30 billion.
$30 billion.
$30 billion in added value versus $420 million in losses. So on balance, looking purely at the economics, he was overwhelmingly a net positive sire.
But that created a dangerous precedent.
It really did. It created a situation where a selection system optimized almost exclusively for maximizing net gain can tolerate and perhaps even implicitly reward sires carrying significant hidden risks. The system, heavily weighted by production traits, is designed to maximize overall net economic gain, not necessarily to preemptively avoid potential genetic catastrophes.
The upside was just too tempting.
A bull like Chief, offering truly revolutionary production potential, became almost irresistible to the industry. His immense positive value effectively overshadowed or excused the massive but largely hidden negative consequences of the HH1 defect. It subtly taught the industry that if the good outweighs the bad, even if the bad is significantly bad, it's acceptable, maybe even desirable in the pursuit of progress.
Which highlights a deep systemic vulnerability, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Extreme genetic concentration, like what we saw happen with Chief, acts as a powerful detonator for otherwise rare, maybe even benign recessive alleles to suddenly become widespread, costly epidemics.
Exactly, that's the perfect word. Detonator. Deleterious recessive alleles exist at low frequencies in almost any large population. Usually they're harmless, just part of the background genetic noise because the chance of two carriers mating is very low.
Right.
But when a single sire's genes are propagated so intensely that they eventually account for, say, 14% of an entire breed's genome, like with Chief, the frequency of his specific recessive alleles skyrockets across that whole population.
Making carrier-to-carrier matings much more likely.
Dramatically more likely. It turns what was once a rare, maybe theoretical risk into a widespread, costly epidemic that causes real economic harm on farms everywhere. The concentration itself doesn't create the defect, but it acts as that powerful detonator, turning a small, localized issue into a potentially breed-wide problem.
And the article warns.
Yeah, the article strongly warns that given the current levels of genetic concentration we see today, and the narrowing list of truly influential grandsires in the Holstein breed right now, it's highly likely that multiple such genetic time bombs are being primed simultaneously within the population as we speak.
That is a truly chilling thought. And it really underscores the urgency of this conversation for every single producer listening today.
It absolutely does.
So, okay. We've laid out the problem, the paradox, the risks, the history in pretty stark terms.
Yeah.
Now let's pivot towards solutions. What can producers actually do on their own farms? And what valuable lessons can we learn from different approaches being used around the world? This brings us to pathways to genetic independence strategies for diversifying your herd's future.
Right, and that's the crucial next step, isn't it? Because what's encouraging here is that the trajectory of relentlessly rising inbreeding isn't necessarily an inevitable, unchangeable outcome. We do have alternative blueprints out there. Models like the cooperative breeding systems offer really valuable insights into how you can successfully balance aggressive genetic gain with long-term diversity and herd sustainability.
And there are things producers can do themselves.
Absolutely. And critically, for you, the producer listening, there are very proactive, practical on-farm strategies you can implement right now to take more control of your herd's genetic future and mitigate some of these risks we've been talking about.
Okay, let's start with those alternative blueprints then. The cooperative model, like Viking Genetics in Scandinavia, seems to offer a fundamentally different set of incentives compared to the North American proprietary model we've largely been discussing. How does that ownership structure actually change their whole approach?
It's a really critical distinction, both in philosophy and in practice. Viking Genetics, for instance, is owned directly by approximately 16,000 dairy farmers across Denmark, Sweden, and Finland.
Owned by the farmers themselves.
Exactly. And that ownership structure fundamentally shifts the core incentives. Whereas a publicly traded proprietary company is primarily obligated to maximize shareholder return, which often translates into aggressively marketing the few sires topping those global indices.
Right, solo winners.
A farmer-owned cooperative, on the other hand, is primarily incentivized to maximize the long-term, holistic profitability and sustainability of its members' herds. The people who own the company are the same people using the product and living with the results.
So their goals are aligned differently.
Completely. The cooperative model naturally favors a more balanced, perhaps more risk-averse approach because its owners are the ones who directly bear the costs of things like inbreeding depression, poor health outcomes, and reduced longevity right there on their own farms. Their success is directly tied to the real-world, long-term success of their members' cows.
So that fundamental difference in incentives translates directly into their breeding goals, which they call the Nordic Total Merit, or NTM. How does that compare to the heavily production-weighted North American indices like NMU that we're so used to seeing?
Yeah, the NTM is a radically different beast, really. It explicitly emphasizes a much broader, more balanced range of traits, not just focusing heavily on production like some other indices tend to do.
What kind of traits?
Well, their breeding objectives are carefully balanced across production, yes, but also health, reproduction, conformation, and various functional traits that contribute to longevity and ease of management. They have a long and really robust history of collecting extensive data on things like hoof health, udder health, resistance to mastitis.
Things that cost farmers money.
Exactly, the things that directly impact profitability beyond just the milk check. And critically, they integrate these traits directly into their selection criteria with significant weighting.
And they're looking at sustainability, too.
Yeah, what's truly pioneering, I think, is their inclusion of environmental sustainability traits. They're actively selecting for improved feed efficiency and, by extension, reduced methane emissions. They actually treat these as heritable components in their index.
So they're breeding for greener cows.
Essentially, yes. They're building sustainability directly into the animal's DNA, offering a powerful pathway to making permanent reductions in the herd's environmental footprint over time. It's a much more holistic view, looking way beyond just the milk pail.
And it's not just about what traits they select for. It sounds like they've actually built structural safeguards into their program to proactively prevent inbreeding from getting out of control, rather than just reacting to it after the fact. What do those safeguards look like?
Precisely. They are very intentional about preventing those genetic bottlenecks we discussed earlier. For instance, they have an explicit policy to use a large and diverse group of sires of sons each and every year.
More variety at the top.
Exactly. Their Viking Jersey program, for example, aims to use around 20 different family lines annually just to ensure they maintain a broad genetic base. They also enforce strict usage limits on individual bulls.
That's so.
No single sire is allowed to produce more than 3 sons that go back into their own breeding program. And a popular bull's active marketing life is typically limited to maybe 6 to 9 months.
To keep things turning over.
Exactly, to ensure constant genetic rotation and prevent any single bull from becoming too dominant too quickly. Plus, they proactively monitor and manage inbreeding rates across their populations, aiming to keep the increase below the FAO's recommended maximum of 1% per generation. They even offer proprietary mating tools, like VicMate, directly to their farmer members to help manage inbreeding decisions right there on the farm. It's a really comprehensive, proactive strategy from top to bottom.
The results seem to speak for themselves, demonstrating the effectiveness of this more balanced approach. What does the actual data show in terms of their herd health, diversity, and maybe longevity?
Absolutely. The proof is in the pudding, as they say. A 2019 analysis, for instance, showed that Viking Jersey heifers had a projected future inbreeding percentage of only 4.7%.
That sounds pretty low.
It is remarkably low, especially when you compare it to the projected 8.1% for U.S. Jersey sires at that time. That significant difference is directly attributed to the more diverse lineages and those stringent management practices they maintain in the Nordic populations.
And beyond just the inbreeding number.
Beyond just inbreeding levels, Nordic cattle consistently demonstrate superior fertility metrics, better overall health indicators, and significantly improved longevity compared to many of the more intensively selected North American populations. They're basically building cows that last longer and likely cost less in terms of vet bills and replacement rates over their lifetime.
Okay, so that's the cooperative model. But beyond these types of programs, there's another alternative pathway that you mentioned is quietly gaining ground, and that's crossbreeding. For producers grappling with these inbreeding concerns in their purebred herds, what does the research say about the potential economic advantages of strategic crossbreeding?
Yeah, crossbreeding is increasingly emerging as a really compelling and very practical economic alternative to sticking strictly with purebred Holstein breeding, especially for producers who are looking to specifically improve resilience and maybe reduce some of those input costs.
What does the research show?
Research pretty consistently shows that crossbred dairy cattle often outperform their purebred contemporaries, particularly for those crucial functional traits like fertility, health, and longevity. You get that benefit of hybrid vigor or heterosis.
Right.
A comprehensive Swedish study, for example, looked at systematic crossbreeding, specifically using Holstein and Swedish Red in rotation, and found that it increased annual profit margins by a significant 20 to 59 euros per cow.
Just from crossbreeding.
From the crossbreeding system. And this improvement was primarily driven by things like enhanced fertility, getting cows pregnant faster and easier, and notably reduced replacement rates. The culling rate dropped from 39% in the purebred herds down to a much more sustainable 30% in the rotational crossbreeding systems.
That's a huge difference in replacement costs right there.
It really is. That alone can have a massive impact on your bottom line.
And it's not just dairy-on-dairy crossbreeding that's gaining traction, right?
Yeah.
Beef-on-dairy seems to be exploding and becoming a major income stream for many operations.
Indeed. Beef-on-dairy crossbreeding programs are definitely seeing strong interest and often command significant premiums. They're becoming a major profit center for many dairies. A 2024 Purina survey actually found that 80% of dairy farmers reported receiving $350 to $700 per head more for their beef dairy cross calves compared to what they'd get for purebred Holstein bull calves.
Wow, that's serious money.
It is. And these programs also offer direct benefits back on the dairy side, too. Things like potentially improved conception rates when using beef semen on certain cows, reduced calving difficulties, lower stillbirth rates compared to using some large-frame dairy sires.
And for specific challenges like heat stress.
Yeah, for challenges like heat tolerance, crossbreeding with genetics from naturally heat-adapted breeds, maybe some Bos indicus influence or breeds selected in hot climates, can offer much more immediate and robust solutions than solely relying on the slower, incremental process of genomic selection for heat tolerance within a purebred population like Holsteins. It's often a faster path to getting resilience for that specific trait. You get a dual benefit of the calf value and the adaptation.
All these insights are incredibly valuable, looking at co-ops, crossbreeding. But for the busy producer, maybe sticking with purebreds for now, what about technology solutions that might be on the horizon? We're awash in data these days, but how can that data infrastructure truly help manage this complex genetic challenge of balancing gain and inbreeding?
This is where the future truly lies, I believe. The Council on Dairy Cattle Breeding, or CDCB, maintains the National Cooperator Database here in the U.S., and that is absolutely the foundational asset for everything we do genetically.
How big is it?
It contains performance records on over 87 million animals, and it integrates something like 10 million genotypes now. It is, without question, the world's largest and most comprehensive database of its kind for any livestock species. This massive repository powers all the genetic tools we currently use, and it's where future solutions will come from.
So what tools exist now, maybe under the hood?
Well, we actually already have tools within that system, such as something called expected future inbreeding, or EFI. The CDCB uses EFI internally right now. It essentially measures an animal's average genetic relationship to the current population.
Okay.
And they use it to subtly adjust the published predicted transmitting abilities, the PTAs, to account for expected inbreeding depression in future offspring. It effectively penalizes sires that are highly related to the current population.
But you're saying that's hidden.
Exactly. Here's the rub. This crucial piece of information, this EFI adjustment, is currently done behind the scenes. It's hidden from you, the end user, the producer, making the mating decision. You don't see that penalty being applied when you look at the final index number.
So the next frontier isn't just generating more data. It's about making that existing data and maybe new calculations actionable, visible, and maybe even prescriptive to the producer.
Yeah.
What should we realistically expect to see in the next, say, 5 to 10 years that will really empower farmers in this area?
Precisely. Visibility and usability are key. The goal for the near future, say 2025 to 2030, is a fundamental shift from these hidden background adjustments to truly actionable breeder-facing dashboards.
What would that look like?
Well, we envision relatedness risk dashboards integrated directly into your everyday herd management software. These dashboards would clearly show a bull's EFI number, sure, but also, crucially, for any mating you propose on screen, it would calculate and display a precise estimate of the expected FROH, that accurate genomic inbreeding measure for the resulting calf.
So you'd see the inbreeding consequence before you make the mating.
Exactly. It makes the trade-off between the potential genetic gain from that bull and the resulting inbreeding level completely visible right there at the exact moment you're making the breeding decision. No more flying blind.
And the ultimate goal?
The ultimate goal, maybe a bit further out, is AI-powered portfolio optimization. Think prescriptive, multi-objective mating programs. You input your herd's genomic data, your specific breeding goals, milk, health, fertility, etc. And importantly, your defined risk tolerance for inbreeding, say, you tell the system, I don't want any calves over 8% ROH.
Okay.
The program would then analyze all available sires and recommend an optimized portfolio of bulls to use across your herd to best meet your goals while staying within your risk limits. It's a fundamental shift away from just picking the single best bull towards strategically engineering the optimal genetic future for your entire herd, consciously balancing immediate gains with that crucial long-term resilience.
That sounds like a really powerful future, putting more control back in the hands of the producer. Okay, so after this incredibly detailed deep dive, for a farmer listening today, maybe feeling a bit overwhelmed but wanting to take action, what are the truly key takeaways? What practical, actionable steps can they implement, starting like tomorrow, to navigate this genomic paradox?
Yeah, it absolutely can feel like a lot, but it really boils down to a few critical practical steps you can take right now to start reclaiming some genetic independence and protect your herd's long-term profitability and resilience. You don't have to wait for future tech.
Okay, first up, it sounds like it's all about knowing your numbers, right? You have to calculate your herd's actual genomic inbreeding level and then critically set a hard target for it. Don't just let it drift.
Exactly. Step 1 is know where you stand. You need to leverage the tools that are already available, likely through your herd management software or maybe your breed association or AI company nominator portals, which link to the CDCB data. Use them to actually find your herd's average genomic inbreeding level specifically. Look for that FROH number if it's available, as that's the most accurate.
And then quantify the cost.
Yes. Then quantify that inbreeding tax for your specific operation. Do the math. Multiply each percentage point your herd average is above, say, a baseline of 5% FROH by that $23 figure per cow. That gives you a real dollar estimate of your current annual losses due to inbreeding. Seeing that number can be very motivating.
I bet. And then set a target.
And once you have that data, establish a firm, explicit target for your herd. Maybe that's keeping the average below 8% FROH, or maybe ensuring no individual mating exceeds 10% FROH. Whatever it is, write it down and enforce it at mating time. Don't let breeding decisions be purely index-driven guesswork when it comes to inbreeding risk. Make it data-driven.
That makes perfect sense. Okay, step 2. It's about consciously breaking free from that narrow genetic funnel we discussed earlier. You recommend something called portfolio breeding, a more strategic, diversified way to select sires.
Yeah, this is about not putting all your genetic eggs in one basket. Implement a disciplined, maybe something like a 40-20 breeding split as a starting point.
How does that work? 40-40-20.
Okay, so allocate maybe 40% of your matings for what you might call income insurance. Use those proven high-index bulls, the chart toppers, but use them strategically on your best, most productive cows, maybe those in their optimal breeding windows where you want the highest chance of a great replacement.
Okay, 40% top index.
Then dedicate another 40% to balanced performers. Select solid, reliable bulls, but specifically look for ones from less related sire families, maybe slightly lower index, but still good all-around bulls. This helps maintain steady progress while actively managing and diluting the overall inbreeding level in the herd.
Right. Good, solid bulls, less related. And the last 20%.
And finally, commit to that last 20% explicitly to diversity builders. This means actively, intentionally choosing true outcross genetics, maybe from different breeds in a cross-breeding system, or maybe sires from completely unrelated lines within your breed, even if their index isn't stellar. Or perhaps engaging in strategic beef on dairy here. This portion is your hedge against those systemic risks, like a new genetic defect emerging or unexpected environmental shifts down the road.
And you mentioned thinking about timing, too.
Yeah, you could even think about seasonal timing. Maybe use more diversity builders in the spring, test some heat-tolerant outcrosses in the summer matings, and then blend your index leaders with balanced performers in the fall. The point is to build a balanced genetic portfolio over time, just like you would with your financial investments. Don't chase just one number.
So those outcross doses, the ones in that 20% maybe, which might not top the charts on conventional indices, they're actually incredibly valuable in the long run. It's about treating them like an insurance premium for your herd's future resilience, isn't it?
Absolutely. You have to shift your mindset here. Understand that genuine outcross sires will likely appear 100, maybe 200 points lower on conventional indices like NMOR, and that's precisely a feature, not a bug, of their genetic difference. That's why they're outcrosses. Right. Recognize their true long-term value. They pay dividends not necessarily on this month's milk check, but when environmental stress hits hard, when disease pressure mounts unexpectedly, or when, heaven forbid, a hidden recessive defect like Chief's HH1 suddenly surfaces in the mainstream lines.
Just to protect you from the unknowns.
Exactly. Prioritize those long-term savings. Remember, avoiding just an extra 5% inbreeding in your herd saves you roughly $115 per cow over her lifetime. That $115 saving often beats chasing 100 index points that never actually make it to your milk check anyway because of the hidden drag from that inbreeding tax.
That's a powerful calculation. Okay, fourth point. Producers need to be more proactive, maybe more vocal, in their interactions with their AI providers and in their overall sourcing decisions. It's about demanding transparency and consciously diversifying your genetic suppliers.
Yes, Absolutely. Don't be a passive consumer. Demand transparency from your AI providers. Actively ask for genomic relationship data or expected future inbreeding EFI information for the bulls you're considering using. Ask about the ROH levels if they track them.
Challenge the status quo.
Yeah, challenge restrictive contracts if they limit your genetic access or lock you into using only certain sire lines. And importantly, look beyond just the conventional North American catalogs from the dominant players. Explore options from cooperative programs, maybe European breeding programs known for different trait emphasis, or look for smaller, specialized AI studs that might be focused specifically on providing genuine outcross options.
Don't be afraid to shop around.
Exactly. Don't be afraid to negotiate for diversity bundles or to work with multiple companies to source the different components of that 40-40-20 portfolio we talked about. Remember, you are the customer, and collective demand from producers has the power to shape the market and encourage suppliers to offer more reverse genetics.
Good point. Finally, number 5. It's about maybe changing what you track and value on your own farm. Go beyond just looking at milk weights to truly understand your herd's overall performance and, crucially, its long-term profitability.
Exactly. You need to expand your KPI dashboard beyond just the bulk tank readings. Monitor those key performance indicators that reflect resilience and longevity. Things like daughter pregnancy rate, DPR, conception rates, days open, average productive life in the herd, and the actual incidence rates of costly health events like mastitis, metritis, lameness.
The things that really determine if a cow is profitable long-term.
Precisely. These metrics are absolutely crucial for measuring the true long-term profitability and the resilience that's being generated per stall in your barn. They tell you if your cows are not just producing high volumes for a short time, but are also staying healthy, breeding back consistently, and critically, staying in the herd for more lactations. Because that's ultimately where the real sustainable profit lies in dairying.
That's incredibly insightful and really powerful practical guidance for producers listening today. Okay, if we leave our listeners with just one final provocative thought today, something to really mull over after they turn this off, what would it be?
It would probably be this. The industry's current trajectory towards ever-increasing inbreeding isn't some irreversible law of nature. It's the result of collective choices, and those choices can be changed. Accepting a little less index gain on paper today by consciously baking in genetic diversity will very often pay far greater real-world dividends in 3 years' time than simply taking another lap around the same increasingly narrow pedigrees ever will.
So the question is,
So the fundamental question for every producer listening is your herd's genetic portfolio truly built just for today's leaderboard snapshot, or is it strategically constructed for tomorrow's inevitable challenges and, ultimately, for long-term resilience and profitability?
a very important question indeed.
Those are truly vital points for anyone in the dairy business to consider. And this has been a really enlightening deep dive into a critically important topic. For more articles and insights that matter to dairy producers, be sure to visit the website at www.thebullvine.com.
And don't forget to follow The Bullvine on your favorite social media platforms as well. Thanks so much for listening.
That's a wrap on today's episode of the Bullvine Podcast. We've just explored how the dairy industry's pursuit of genetic perfection has created a billion-dollar hidden tax that's bleeding operations nationwide. But more importantly, we've shown you practical steps to fight back. Remember, the producers building genetic independence now, while outcross options are still available, will have the most resilient and profitable herds by 2030. Don't let your breeding decisions be dictated by a system designed to concentrate power rather than maximize your long-term success. Make sure to subscribe to the Bullvine Podcast wherever you listen, and share this episode with fellow dairy producers who need to hear this message. For more cutting-edge dairy intelligence and investigative reporting, visit us at www.thebullvine.com. Until next time, keep questioning the conventional wisdom and keep building the future of dairy on your terms. This is the Bullvine, where we never stop digging for the truth that matters to your operation.